Hi everyone. Just waiting as everybody comes in from the waiting room. Lovely. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Laura, the producer of the Theatre Green Book, and this is part of our International Deep Dive webinar series. So we're focusing particularly on buildings today, and anyone who's been to any of the previous webinars we've had so far will know that the idea of these webinars is to take ideas from the Theatre Green Book, but pick out a few and explore them in a bit more depth. So today is easy wins for buildings. And just a very quick bit of housekeeping before we start. If anyone would like to use captioning, it is available on Zoom along the bottom bar with CC. You might need to click on the 3 dots for more to be able to see it. We are recording today's session just because we do invite the whole of the International Theatre Green Book community to these webinars. Some people aren't able to make it because of time zones, so that's just why we take the recording. Please do keep yourself muted while the speakers are talking, but feel free as we go to pop any questions you think of in the chat, and we'll come to them at a suitable moment. If anyone has any technical issues, pop them in the chat and I'll try and help you out as we go. So with that, over to Paddy.
Hi there, thanks very much, Laura, and thanks to all of you for coming. My name's Paddy Dillon. I'm one of the co-founders of the Theatre Green Book. Our subject this morning is easy wins for buildings. Now, we know anyone who has done a footprinting exercise of almost any theatre that has a building will know that one of our very biggest impacts comes from the energy we use in our buildings. You'll also know, as we all do, that planning capital projects is a difficult, a time-consuming process. We all know that raising the money we need to upgrade all of our theatre buildings across Europe and across the world to be fit for purpose in the climate crisis is one of the hugest, the biggest challenges that we all face. What that means is that the easy wins, the things which we can do quickly and relatively cheaply to cut down on our building's energy use, is a really, really important part of this challenge. We've got a really good panel, an experienced panel to talk about that today. With me are Angela Wachner, Deputy Executive Director at the Bush Theatre in London. We've got Richard Willoughby, Director of Operations at Oxford Playhouse, one of our historic theatres in Oxford. We've got Geoff, Hense, Technical Operations Manager at ATG Entertainment, looking after a large portfolio of buildings. And we've also got Jason Cox from Bureau Happold, Director of the Building Environment Team at Bureau Happold. Bureau Happold, as many of you know, are not only a fantastic sustainability consultant, but also a build and engineering and structural consultant, and they are our partners and co-founders in the Theatre Green Book. So we're delighted to have Jason with us today. I'm going to pass over to each of them in turn to introduce themselves a little bit more fully and to give their first thoughts about this challenge of easy wins for buildings. So can I start, Angela, with you?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Paddy. Hello, everyone. As Paddy said, my name is Angela. I'm Deputy Executive Director at the Bush Theatre. We're based in West London, and I lead on sustainability for the organisation. For those of you who don't know the Bush Theatre, we are a new writing venue, so we produce our own shows. We've been around since 1972, but only in this building since 2011. The building that we're housed in now is an old library that was built in 1895. So we are a building of interest in a conservation area, which has its own challenges, but is not as big of a hurdle as a listed building. We've got 2 auditoria, and about 300 seats across those. So we're a relatively small venue. So that's just a bit about our building. In terms of quick wins, we've actually been very lucky because we moved into this building in 2011 and had 2 capital projects already. So in terms of quick wins, we have been able to fit a lot of those into the capital projects that we have run. So as part of those, we've tried to always squeeze in wherever we could sustainability initiatives, including the last one we did, which was around replacing our roof. We squeezed some sustainability into that as well. We've obviously done the basic things like changed our energy to green energy, replaced LEDs, and done all of those things, which we have seen make a tangible difference to our consumption, which we've been tracking for the last 15 years now. So yeah, that's us.
Fantastic, Angela. Thanks so much for telling us about that. I'm going to move on to Richard Willoughby at Oxford Playhouse, slightly larger and slightly older as a theatre. Richard, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So my role here is the Director of Operations. I lead on our Sustainability Task Force. I took on this role 2015. We decided we needed to make some changes on a sustainability front. We certainly thought that we had things in place, but then as soon as you dip your toe in the water, you realise you don't. We are a Grade 2 star listed building in the centre of Oxford. I like to sort of call it the posh end of Oxford. We are smack bang in the middle of that. So anything we want to do to the exterior of the building and or parts of the building, we need to go through ferocious planning. Some of that can be quite pragmatic. Some of it can be very time consuming and a bit annoying. So moving forward, some of the things that we'd put in place, we ended up having a lovely time in 2021 with Bura Happold, who came to the venue, part of the Green Book, and used us as a little guinea pig. We had done certain things at that point, but when you get the experts in, you realise, wow, we've got a long way to go, and it was most welcome. So we put it all to the test. Quick wins, essential quick wins straight away. Things like little things you do to your home: draft excluders on all of the doors, pipe lagging on all the heat pipes. You don't think of that really, but we did all of that straight away, noticed a massive difference. The thing that we did, I implemented this probably just before COVID, is we have a building management system, our BMS, and it wasn't being managed correctly. We weren't getting the most out of it. It wasn't effective. So it could get turned on at 9 o'clock for heating, and air conditioning could possibly come on at the same time, and they might run all day. They might run all night. They might run all week long. We weren't being effective. We weren't managing correctly. So now front of house team are very, very strict on that. They're all managed to do that. We've taken away the power from anybody in the building to log in and turn the heating on because their office feels a bit chilly. That's made a huge difference straight away, because there's no point in chilling a room with no one in it, and there's no point in heating a theatre if we're closed. So one of the things that we did straight away, and one thing I would stress, use your BMS monitoring system very, very well, and you'll see the savings straight away. That was great. We had some secondary glazing fitted throughout our building. We have these lovely large sash windows, and as I said, getting planning is awkward. We were fairly lucky as it's the inside of the building, so anything we were doing could be reversed essentially, but that still had to go through planning. Putting the secondary glazing in once again just brought the heating cost down again, and we noticed these things within 12 months. It's just remarkable. Lots of other little things that we went through ourselves, things that were passed on to us from Bura Happold, putting air curtains in the front foyer doors. You know, when you walk into a shop and they got hot air blowing down on you. Well, I always thought that was absolutely crazy. I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard in my life. However, I was proved wrong. So we put in 5 of these. We didn't need to put the heating on, so the boilers weren't being used. We weren't using fossil fuel. We were using electricity. It's a lot cleaner, etc., etc. Still, it was a lot cheaper. I could go on, Paddy. I don't know how long you want me to talk for, but we did quite a lot under the umbrella. But I might just stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I'm going to come back because there's loads there that it would be great to dig in to a bit more deeply.
Sure.
Can I ask you one question just before we move on to Geoff, which is what constitutes an easy win, I guess, would be useful for everybody to understand. Are most of the things you're talking about there stuff where you didn't have to make a big case for a lot of investment because it was relatively low cost? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, Paddy. So the things that I found quick, when we have, I wouldn't say we have a maintenance department. We have a maintenance chap who will pretty much take care of the certain easy wins, like the pipe lagging, like the draft excluders. So that's a low cost thing that you can take care of straight away. It is a quick fit, quick win, and very inexpensive. And you do not have to go and get permissions for that.
So that's quite a good definition, isn't it? That you're not getting into big cost and you're not getting into permissions.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. And we'll come back to hear more about some of those points later. But first, just to get to the other end of the spectrum, if you like, Angela was talking about a very dynamic but relatively small theatre in London. Richard is managing a mid-scale historic theatre. Geoff, tell us a bit about the challenge that you are facing at ATG.
Thanks, Paddy. So I'm the technical operations manager at ATG Entertainment. We are a multinational company managing theatres across Europe, America, and my purview particularly is the 36 venues that we have in the UK, and that ranges in size from the very small studio spaces. We have the Norman Bragg Theatre, which is part of the Aylesbury Waterside, all the way up to, I think the biggest is Edinburgh Playhouse at around about 3,000 seats. We have everything from historic Grade 2 listed 200 plus year old Theatre Royal Brighton to the very new Swansea Arena. And we're adding new theatres. I think we've just announced that we're going to be building a new theatre in Vienna. So we have a very wide variety of theatres, a wide variety of challenges. We've been, to some background, I originally I spent about a decade working as a head of production and technical manager at the Arcola Theatre, which is an off-West End theatre really geared towards sustainability and has been for a very, very, very long time. So I have a background in that, and then coming to ATG, I've had the chance to try and implement some of these big changes or try out some of the things that have come through the Theatre Green Book. And I guess my big takeaway for everyone really is that the quick wins, if you take a step back from it, are a pretty good guide to the variety of things that you should think about. And as somebody who has to think about a variety of different kind of buildings, I would say the best thing you can do is to understand your building, and that is the quickest win that you can, although quick, it's the best win that you can get, and the quick wins, the easy wins, are the ones that are a really good guide to where to start in terms of trying to figure out what will work for you. Some of these things will, and some of them won't. I think that's a start.
Fantastic. That's a really good introduction. And a quick question for you, I guess, is you're working with a very varied portfolio of buildings, as you said. Have you found that the principles of quick wins, the principles that are enshrined in the Theatre Green Book, are fairly readily applicable at different scales and to different buildings, even though the specific building challenges might be different?
Yeah, I think within the quick wins, there are things which, depending on your venue, are extremely relevant, and others less so, and vice versa, depending on the space. So definitely, for me, being able to look at a whole portfolio of theatres, we're really lucky to be looking after these, to be the custodians of these theatres, to be able to say to the staff, okay, this is your guide. Start thinking about these things. And some of them, Swansea Arena, 4 years old now? They don't have to worry about their draft proofing. They have solar arrays. But it allows them to have a roadmap of the things to be thinking about in the long term.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really helpful. Let me pass finally to ask Jason Cox to introduce himself. Björn Happold, as I said, were co-authors of the Theatre Green Book, and Jason, you were very involved with us in creating the Building Survey tool, which is the Theatre Green Book's self-help tool to help you come up with a plan for your building and identify quick wins. Laura, you might would it be possible to put the link in the chat for those who don't know it? But Jason, let me pass over to you.
Thank you, Paddy. Good afternoon, everyone. As Paddy said earlier, I'm a director at Björn Happold in the Building Environments team. Really enjoyed working with Paddy and the team pulling together the Green Book. And I think for us, the easy wins section was probably the most important section. It's all important, but we're very much aware that theatres don't have the budgets to do everything at once, cannot go dark for years on end whilst doing serious upgrades and capital projects. So to find a way where theatres didn't need to employ a professional team, didn't necessarily have to go on a fundraising expedition, and could start to break down what is quite a big question. How do I reduce my carbon footprint? How do I reduce my energy usage? How do I get these energy bills down? Because it's becoming like an anchor around a business. Having to have, being open is very expensive. And a way of starting that journey, making it easy. Easy wins are simple activities, as Richard rightly says. What would you do at home? You'd make sure your windows were closed. You'd put draft excluders on. You'd maybe turn down your thermostat a degree or two to see if anybody really notices and the level of impact that has. Turn your lights off. Maybe, if you have a security person or a theatre manager that walks around last thing on an evening, just make sure they're empowered to turn things off. Fans, under dressing room desk heaters for performers were a bane of our life on a couple of projects where they'd be left on overnight, and we were racking our brains to see where this energy usage was coming from. So I think for me, easy wins are things that shouldn't cost a lot of money, are simple to do, but sometimes when you're faced with a big question, looking for small answers is quite difficult. So it was a way to empower people to start that journey on their own, get to understand their buildings, not have to spend money on fees, and really start to make that impact. No one's going to become carbon neutral overnight. It's stepping stones and small steps and forward progression, I think, is really important. So that was where we kind of came from with the easy wins. How can people do this on their own without great investment and really start to see the impact of these measures?
Fantastic, thanks, Jason. And let's start there with a question that I'm sure a lot of people in the webinar will be wanting to focus on, which is, so what can we do? What are the easy wins? What can we do? And let's start in keeping with the principles that the Theatre Green Book is built around, looking at how we make a building need less energy by making it more efficient. What are the easy wins to improve insulation, to stop heat loss through windows, doors? Angela, was there anything at the Bush that you were able to do quite simply that prevented heat loss through insulation or through secondary glazing or anything of that sort?
Yeah, absolutely. In our second bit of capital work that we did, we installed secondary glazing where we could, or double glazing where that was possible. We added insulation where we could in ceilings and various places like that. But we also added a sedum roof as part of a living roof to add insulation to our performance space. Other things that we've done to reduce heat loss and that kind of thing, similar to what Jason was saying. We do now have a system with our duty managers of patrolling and closing things and turning off heaters and all of those suggestions that Jason was making there. That's obviously more an operational side rather than a building side, but we have found that that's made a huge difference with them just turning things off. It has really reduced our energy consumption. We of course did the things like putting in draft excluders and things like that, which has also of course helped.
And that did make a noticeable difference, because I think sometimes people think that the easy wins aren't worth doing, but all of you, I think, have said that they really have made a difference to comfort, I imagine, as well as energy use.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely made an improvement in comfort, particularly in the performance spaces, which we don't use really the heating in there anymore. We don't use air conditioning in there, although it does, now that it's getting so hot in the summer, it's starting to feel a bit like it might need air conditioning at some point. They're so well put together now that they kind of look after themselves. And I did do a calculation. I think we've reduced our energy consumption by 25% since we started, since we did those capital works.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. It's although we don't have full evidence for it, we hear anecdotally a lot that a 25% cut in energy use is really quite achievable. Richard, what about Oxford Playhouse and the easy wins for the building envelope that you managed to achieve? A lot of building envelope works are going to be expensive capital projects. What were the relatively cheap easy wins that you found?
So as Angela said, doing draft excluders, pipe bagging, super cheap. If you have a maintenance team or a maintenance person, they can take care of that themselves quite easily. So super cheap. As I said before, managing the BMS, making sure that is not running when it doesn't need to be, making sure you're not heating a part of the building that's not in use, doesn't need heating, for instance, and make sure it's coming on and off at the correct times. You're getting into the nicer periods of weather now, so we're really monitoring it so much that it's just off right now, and we're seeing if anybody complains.
I'm going to come back to BMSs and controls in a minute, but I'm interested in how much we can do within the easy wins category to improve the building's envelope and performance.
It's certainly.
You talked about air curtains as having been successful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would just say, it's certainly about the training side of it. You must make sure that you have an evening patrol going around at the end of the evening, making sure that they're turning everything off, because you get heaters left on, lights left on, computer monitors left on, fans left on, etc., and it costs a fortune. For the actual envelope of the building sealing that, we've got a very leaky building. We've got old, beautiful old windows that, although maintained, they're just going to shift heat because they're single paned. Having the secondary glazing was a complete breakthrough for us. It was a game changer, actually. Really sealed the unit. The air curtains, as I said, I thought, what on earth? However, it just makes the area a lot nicer. It's nicer to enter. So on a chilly evening, people walking in automatically feel more comfortable. Our staff, our box office sit near and quite close to the front doors, foyer doors. They're not having to sit with gloves and coats on anymore, which isn't the sort of look you want when people walk in. So making that, you don't have to have all of these heaters on at once, by the way. You can just have one strategic heater on, and it just makes a massive difference. And it really made the place feel warmer, so much so that we've actually put in place a little kind of, when do we actually need it? How long do we need it for? So they're on timers now.
And a question in the chat from Lizzie Moran. I think this is going to be about how easy it is to install them. Did they need 3-phase power?
Yeah.
Or could you take it off? They did need 3-phase power.
Yeah. We use 3-phase just to be safe.
Yeah, fantastic. Geoff, moving on to your buildings in the estate. at ATG Entertainment, and focusing particularly on the easy wins for improving insulation and building envelope. What did you find there? Have you managed to make improvements to the building envelope without big capital projects?
Yes, I think that I think the important point here is that if you take something like roof insulation and you take a theatre, you know, with a large, even a small theatre will have a large performance area. Actually, I guess the thing that we've found is that it's almost impossible to just take a blanket approach to insulation across the entire building. What you can do and have a really quick, and a much more cost-effective way of creating insulation and making the most of that building is to focus on areas. So if you have an office part of the building, for instance, where the admin offices are, maybe the back of house, you know, dressing room block, these things tend to be their own separate areas bolted onto sides of theatres together. That can be something to really focus, you know, take an area, focus on that. I think that for us is significantly easier to be able to, particularly when you're starting to address these things, take a manageable section rather than, you know, getting overwhelmed with the idea of how am I going to take a 3,000 seat theatre and insulate its roof space.
Fantastic. So Jason, we've got on that sort of quick run through what can we do as an easy win for building envelopes. We've got focusing on draft proofing and the weak spots of windows and doors. We've got targeting specific areas of roof rather than to try to do the whole thing. What are we missing there? What else would you add in?
So I think that's a good list. I think Geoff makes a really good point. What we want to do is to reduce the amount of heating, the amount of energy we use. So understanding where we use it's really important. If you have a space that isn't currently heated, but is also poorly insulated, you don't need necessarily to add the insulation to that space. If you have an occupied space which is feeling cold and people are heating it, then concentrate on that area. So focus in and concentrate on where you are using the energy first, I would suggest. With the building fabric is very important because all of those losses, if you can reduce the losses, you need smaller plant. Smaller plant uses less energy, less carbon footprint, less energy costs. So it's important to stop the losses first. You can do that visually. I've been in a number of theatres where you can visually see the gaps between the doors and between the windows. Not so relevant at the moment, but in the winter, it's relatively cheap to hire a thermal camera. And we do, that's one of the things that we would do, is ask that the theatre is heated, get the heating on for a good 4, 5, 6 hours, really heat the building up. And then walk around the outside when the outside temperature is cold. So it's the big temperature difference. And you can see where the heat is starting to bleed out of your building through the roofs, through gaps, through windows. So very simply, you can start to initially understand where those losses are coming from. Stop those losses. Cedar roofs are great. Thermally, they're great. They are very heavy. So you have to be mindful of where you use those. But I would always... what's occupied, what's needing heating, and then where are my losses coming from? And if you can tighten up your building, you need to put less heat and less coolant into it, because it's not, you're not trying to heat the local high street. You're keeping it within your building. So that's a really good place to focus, I think.
Fantastic. So that's a really, really good framing of it. And in summary, yes, insulating a building is often a big capital project, but don't give up. There are things we can do in the easy wins to improve it and cut down on the amount of heat the building, amount of energy the building needs. Let's move on then to the area which it always seems to me is the most promising for easy wins, which is how we control the energy we use. Whether it's a building management system or whether it's local controls, how do we make sure that we're not lighting, warming, ventilating or cooling spaces that aren't being used, and generally improving the efficiency of our energy using systems. Angela, what sort of controls do you have at the Bush? Have you installed a building management system or do you still use local controls?
We've got local controls, Paddy. Yeah, we've got no building management system. We think at some point we may put one in, but at the moment we have, like I said, just a series of processes around when things are switched on, when things are switched off, patrolling particular areas. We effectively turn off our heating entirely from April through November and don't have it on at all at that point. So it's just the hot water, and we're about to move all of our hot water to electric hot water, so that, because we know we switch off the heating for that long period of time, if we could switch off the boilers largely for that period of time, that would make a great saving for us. But we also did something else recently, probably just before winter this year. I zoned some of the heating so that I could, because it was heating all of the ground floor if you switched it on. And so I zoned it to different rooms, which was done relatively easily by our boiler maintenance person. They just put controls on each of the radiators or section of radiators so that we could switch on individual ones.
Right.
And that's really helped to control that more.
So you're doing a lot of your controls through just good staff processes, as it were. Jason, can I turn to you to say, are there ways of automating those? And what would you, as it were, be advising as ways of automating those for a theatre that wasn't able to rely on such good staff processes?
I mean, there's a lot of data on the amount of energy that you can save from having a well set, not necessarily expensive, I mean, not cheap, but just a well set up, well managed BMS system, knowing when rooms are going to be occupied, and only heating them, an hour before, understanding, and often, CO2 is a good way to control areas. That's how we know someone's in this. Unless you can link it up to a booking system, which is quite technical, having CO2 sensors, that would tell you that somebody's in the room. And then,
could you explain a bit how that works for those who are less technical?
So obviously, we breathe out carbon dioxide, and sensors can pick that up. The more CO2 in the air, the more kind of lethargic people feel, the more tired they can feel. So sometimes in an auditorium, we often talk to clients that they want to lower the temperature because people are feeling drowsy. Now, isn't temperature. Temperature is more about comfort. That's CO2 levels. So if you can reduce the CO2 levels in a space, you feel less drowsy. But it's a good way of understanding if a space is occupied. Right. Because you need someone in the space to generate the CO2. So there are a number of ways that you can do it through local controlled TRVs on radiators and local thermostats.
TRVs, perhaps again, could ask you to explain.
So just adjusting the amount of heat and when that heat goes into the radiator. So the valve, it's a valve that sits on the incoming side of the radiator, and it will just stops the water coming in and heating the radiator up. So you don't lose that heat, it just recirculates back through the system. So there are some very simple ways to set things up. We always, when we talk to clients, are you happy? Yeah, generally we're happy. Take it down a degree or two. Just reduce it slightly. See if anybody notices. Big energy savings, 1, 2, 3 degrees in your heat generation. Big savings. Turning it off in rooms that aren't occupied. Big savings again. If you can have, if as part of a capital project, if you can have a building-wide BMS system, the savings do grow and are exponential. But they can be quite intrusive. It can be very disruptive and quite expensive. So I think local controls are a great place to start, because you can do your building bit by bit as the funding becomes available or as a space isn't being used. If you have a large capital project, we would always suggest to clients that they invest in the BMS system. And then that way, once you're, we started off talking about the building fabric. Once you lose those losses, it takes less time to heat a space up. Now you as a person walking around, you can't nip into a building every 5 minutes and turn it off. The BMS system would know that, right, it's been on an hour, we're up to temperature, I can turn everything off. and most rooms then will stay warm if they're in use, and you have good insulation and no drafts and no leakage. So yeah, there are varying steps to go through.
So in summary, I guess we're aiming to get to a situation where we're never lighting, heating, cooling, or ventilating spaces unless they need it, and that means controlling them through thermostats and through timers and so on. And a building management system, a BMS, is software that will control all of that automatically.
Yeah,
give you real fingertip control.
Absolutely, and it's something that you can set up, and you can leave. You can have seasonal changes in it. In winter, it might come on for a bit longer. But what it also does, I mean, we did talk to a few clients about talking to their audiences about, we're going to trial something. We're not going to cool the auditorium to the same level. We're not going to heat the foyers to the same level. Let us know what you think, and it gives you a quick way to do that. If it's not working and you're getting too many complaints, you just go over to the computer and just take it up a couple of degrees. So it does give you that flexibility, especially dark periods. Do you need to be heating the changing rooms?
Yeah.
Things like that can come into play quite easily.
So the more controls you've got over timing and thermostat, and the more you can subdivide spaces into smaller units, so you're not lighting a whole floor, you're just lighting one room, the better.
Yeah, I mean, the quicker and the more often you can turn things off, the more energy you will save. So most BMS systems will allow you to do that much quicker. So over time, they'll start to pay for themselves.
Fantastic. Richard, at Oxford, listening to all of that, does that reflect the approach you took in your energy management, in your control of all the systems that used energy?
Yeah, absolutely. Delving into the BMS system a little further, as Jason says, you can just literally make sure that rooms are only ever coming up to temperature, and then it's shutting off. You're not putting heat into or coolant into rooms that aren't being used, so you can manage that system. And it's just about making sure we have a meeting room diary that we go through. So if we know a meeting room is going to be used, we'll heat it an hour before. It will turn itself off when people enter the room. It tends to regain that temperature for however long. A couple of hours you might start to dip. It's interesting to know about the CO2 monitors, which is something I might have to look into. But generally, it's not. As soon as we started using the BMS more and managing that heat, we noticed the difference straight away in our gas usage.
And how do you make sure that you're using that the BMS is being used to its full extent? Do you get regular advice from the manufacturer of the BMS system? How do you manage that? Okay, well,
we have a service twice a year, generally, and any updates that are carried out, and any information that we think that we might want, any updates that we feel that would be nice, we try and implement at that point. So they sort of come in and they will set it up for us in using our knowledge of the theatre, and then we go from there. But we use a company who are fairly local, and they're always useful on the phone, and they'll come out if necessary. Right.
Geoff, you're looking at the challenge of reducing energy across a large range of buildings, a large number of buildings. What's really jumped out for you in trying to maximize your controls and minimize energy use?
So we've had a variety of different things. It's interesting listening to everyone talking about the ways of controlling time and whether the spaces are used. One of the things that we did at Milton Keynes was to a company, I think it was IoT Horizon, came and installed a system whereby we could monitor what was being used and where throughout the day, and then with a specific goal of turning off front of house fridges when they're not being used. So and the data that came back from that is, while the actual the service that was provided, and they did a great job, it was very expensive. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest that everyone should go and do this kind of thing. But what I can report back from it is the savings from turning off your fridges when they're not used is significant. I mean, up to 60% on the amount of power used by those fridges saved by only having them come on. So the part of the overall cost was about understanding when the spaces were going to be used. So somebody having to program the system for, well, this week's a dark week. This is a matinee day. This is a matinee day. Getting all that right. We've found some significant savings around that. So if there's a way of doing it easier, more locally, that can be done, I would suggest that would be a significant way of saving electricity.
There's another thing which comes top of the list actually in the building survey tool of the Theatre Green Book that helps you identify these easy wins. Something I've always been very interested in, voltage optimization. Do you have any experience of that at ATG Entertainment, Geoff?
Absolutely. And it was one of those things that kind of piqued our interest as being something that could be significant in the amount of savings we might find from it. So we did a trial at Milton Keynes Theatre and at Woking at the New Victoria. And the savings from doing that are quite significant. I've written it down. I think we saw over a 13-month period an 8% drop in electricity usage.
That's
and
extraordinary.
I think Woking is something similar. It really phenomenal amount of savings. Sorry, I'm literally just trying to find some kilowatt hours. So after 13 months, that's actual kilowatt hour savings of 56,079 kilowatt hours.
Wow. And was it an expensive thing to do or relatively low cost?
It was paid back after 12 months.
Wow, that's fantastic. Jason, you might be the one to explain to everyone a little bit, including me, a little bit more about what voltage optimization is.
Sure. Okay. So it is a relatively technical thing. It's to do with the voltage that we get from the mains supply isn't necessarily always what they say it will be. There's a plus or minus on that voltage. So what this does is it's a series of transformers. So it can remove any harmonics from the main supply, any transient voltages in the main supply, and it cleans up the supply that then we use within our buildings. It can change the voltage from the incoming supply so that the voltage is more aligned with the equipment that we're using within the building. So the solutions are relatively standard, but they will differ from building to building depending on the main supply, the age of equipment that you have in motors and pumps especially. There's a big saving to be made there. It's just a way of making the incoming power supply more efficient and more aligned with the building's usage so that you don't need so much of it. And then when you don't need so much of it, that's when you see the savings.
And who would if I was managing a theatre and wanted to explore voltage optimization, who would I turn to for advice on it?
So there are a number of manufacturers. There are specialist contractors that can look at it. Engineers, you're a Happold if you have a friendly engineering consultancy that's worked on your buildings previously, they should be able to help you out with that. It's something that we look at, but most engineers will. So if you have someone that you've used before, someone that understands your building, someone you're friendly with, maybe have a chat with them, or you're a Happold if you want to, and we can help.
Fantastic. So on the building envelope, there are things we can do that are easy wins, and it's really important to do them to cut down how much energy we need. In managing our energy, there are some really significant things we can do which will achieve some quite big energy savings through improving how we control our energy. Let's move on to generating energy on site, photovoltaics and the rest. Within the Theatre Green Book, Jason, we sort of decided there weren't easy wins. Do you think that's still the case, or have costs come down so that we could or perhaps should be looking at renewables as part of the easy win portfolio?
Costs are coming down. I think there's still not at a level that I would say would be an easy win.
Yeah.
There are some big questions around PVs. Their orientation is important. Roof strength, access, and also we need to be mindful of the usage profile of a theatre. If the usage profile is mostly in the evenings when the sun's not out, those PVs become less efficient. The payback will be a lot longer. If you have a business model and income streams that start off early morning cafe and go all the way through to an evening performance, then the payback will be much quicker. And they'll become much more relevant to that particular theatre. So the energy use profile is quite important. The building orientation, roof orientation, strength of the roof is also quite important. So I would say PV is something that I would suggest people take advice on before they commit to spending any money. But if you have the right profile and the answers to those questions are positive answers, it definitely provides some benefits. Absolutely.
Let me quickly check, Angela, Richard, and Geoff. Have you included photovoltaics and other renewables generation as part of your package of works to your buildings? And did you find them to be easy wins or relatively complicated?
Yeah, I can take that first, Paddy. We installed some in 2015, not as part of a capital project, but as a grant that we managed to secure. They are providing about 5% of our electricity for the year. It depends, of course. So we're actually looking now as part of a project that we're doing now to double that, the amount of solar we have on site.
Right.
Yeah.
Richard and Geoff, do you have anything to throw in on renewables?
Absolutely. So there's a project that we're going for at the moment. We've got quite a large space, roof space. We've had some quotes in and taken some advice on that as well, looking to save around about between 15 and 20%, or it would allow 15 or 20% electricity. That would possibly be enough to power our pantomime for that period of time. So it would be it would be a great thing to do, and secondly, it'd be a great marketing tool as well. So with us, like I've already said, planning permission is always a little bit more difficult. So we're going through conversations with Historic England at the moment. So we'll watch this space for that.
Right.
I'll take it. We've got with Swansea Arena. We developed we've got a solar PV system that in 2023 generated over 66,000 kilowatt hours of clean energy. You need the space. You need the space to be able to do it. One of the things that we have found is that the biggest space that we have generally is our stage houses, and with the ever increasing size of touring theatre, we need every ounce that we can fit into our stage houses. So it can be tricky. We do, when you've got a good strong structural steel rig that you can that has plenty of capacity in it, then there is definitely we have theatres where we're thinking about whether or not we could put it into, but it's definitely low on the priority list for us because of the requirement for space and load capacity.
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to turn in a minute to payback and what we know about the impact of some of these easy wins in reducing energy and therefore reducing costs. But first, I want to pick up a question in the chat from Ben, which, Jason, I'm going to throw it at you if that's okay. We know that to reduce energy, we want to insulate our buildings better, but the materials we use for insulation, particularly often in historic buildings where we're looking for very efficient insulation materials, and those materials, of course, themselves have an environmental impact. How do we balance those two? It's a question that comes up quite often.
So yes, absolutely. Insulation does have an embedded carbon factor on it that you can take into account. You also need to think about the thickening of the walls. Where is this insulation going? Is it going on the outside of the building as kind of a new render? Is it on the inside as a new wall finish, thickening up walls? The more you use it, obviously, the bigger the savings, so the quicker it will offset that carbon footprint, and you'll start to see the paybacks. It's very difficult, especially in listed buildings. And we also need to be very careful about not over sealing buildings and ending up with condensation and poor air movement. So roof insulation is always the easiest way to do it. If you have flat roofs or you have a roof void, those would be the places that I would suggest that you start. If you want to increase the U value, the thermal performance of your envelope, I would take some architectural and engineering advice on that, just to make sure you're getting the right product for your building to give the right results. I don't think there's any one straight answer on that. It will have a positive impact. It can be difficult to implement on some buildings, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. So time running out a little bit, but I'm very keen to get onto the subject of the impact that some of these easy wins can have. Angela, at the Bush, have you managed to evaluate, or do you just have a sort of instinctive sense of the kind of extent to which the easy wins that you've put in place have really had an impact on energy use and cost saving?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard for us to tell, Paddy. In terms of energy, definitely, we've seen about a 25% reduction over the last decade since we started tracking. But the problem that we're facing now is we're actually tracking better. So our carbon consumption has increased, but it's because we're just tracking things that we weren't tracking very well before, particularly around our productions and around audience travel and other aspects of. So when I look at our entire carbon output, it is more than it was 10 years ago. But I can see individual things like our water consumption is down 15%, our energy is down 25%, our solar is giving us 5%. So I can see it in those ways. I also can't see it really in finance in terms of money, because all of our costs have increased. So it's a bit of a difficult picture at the moment, I would say.
Richard, what about yourselves? Have you managed to correlate between the works you've done and savings in energy?
Yeah, when we installed things like secondary glazing, etc., we just basically looked at the first year, and it was quite easy to compare that what the spend was the year before and what the spend was afterwards, and we were saving an initial 20%. Carrying on doing other bits of work in the building, on energy alone, we're saving up to 27% now. So it's all going up the more we do. I think, as I keep harping on about, I think the use of the BMS has really instilled in some of our staff so much that it's almost become a hobby, that it's really being used now. It's being really well managed. Not a lone radiator in the building is on all the time. It's not anymore. So that is what it is. But how we calculated this was it was our lovely finance department calculated all that for us purely on costings. Water, again, because we're using electric heaters now for our waters. So we're turning our boilers off. So that's we're looking at probably 10% saving on that as well.
Yeah, so these are really significant numbers. Geoff, you're dealing with a much larger data set, if you like, with the number of buildings you have. Do you have any clear pattern of the energy savings you're creating through what you're doing?
I mean, just to go back to the last point, really, about the BMS, we're just, in terms of, and this harks back to what I was saying at the beginning, the understanding the building, it can have an enormous effect. So that we've seen in Richmond, at the Richmond Theatre, the staff realised that their BMS was using the one particular part of the DX heating cooling unit was using 40% of the total venue electrical energy.
Wow.
And so by understanding when it needed to be used and finding better ways of using it, they're currently aiming and are on target to achieve a 25% drop in that, which would be 10% of the entire venue electrical bill.
Okay.
So there are multiple different versions of this similar kind of story about from across the group of teams investing time in understanding what's happening and speaking to specialists, the people that help with the BMS, the engineers that come out for prepared maintenance, preventative maintenance, and having those conversations about how do we cut this down, what could we possibly be doing. It's those specialists, the ones that are the sort of gatekeepers to where those savings might begin, and I think that's where we can see a massive change for very little money.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear that there are such good savings to be heard, something we're hearing from all of you. Time getting very, very tight, so Jason, I'll throw at you a question that's just come in from Katie in the chat. What are people's thoughts on the usefulness of running a nighttime audit?
I think if people are new to this journey, or they're just starting to think about how they're going to start to save energy, reduce their carbon footprint, getting a good baseline is really important. So having a night audit is a good way to look at that, because you want to be using no energy when you're in areas and in your building when it's not in use. So if you are using stuff at night, that would be an easy win. I would suggest that people start to store and capture current energy usage, and then start to do night audits, start to look at where energy is being used, because everybody wants a good news story on this, don't we? So we need to know where we start, and then as we start to do these activities, we can start to see the energy use dropping. So that's useful. Understanding where you're using the energy is key. Daytime, nighttime, weekends, date. If you don't know where you're using it, you don't know where you need to save it. So having that information is really important.
Fantastic, thank you, Jason. I wish we had time for more. There's some questions in from Kurt Rubesh. Kurt, I'm sorry we haven't got to all of those. There's one which I'll answer actually, because it's such an important one, which we hear a lot from theatres across Germany, actually, particularly where the theatre is not run by the theatre management, but by the municipality or the city, and therefore people have very little chance to control and to change it. What we've learnt from some theatres has been that the key thing is to build a good relationship with the authority who is responsible for the building, and then you can use the Theatre Green Book building survey tool to start to suggest to them a plan of action to improve it. But it does really depend on building that relationship. Thank you so much to all of you for joining. Thanks particularly so much to our panel, Angela, Richard, Geoff and Jason, for bringing your expertise to this. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, and I'll pass back to Laura to close us off.
Thanks, Paddy. Just to finish off, I popped some links in the chat. So if anyone missed the building survey tool earlier, also there's building toolkits. So there's one specifically on BMS. So you might want to take a read of that. There's also a link to case studies. So you can read more about the Bush and Oxford Playhouse on their easy wins there if you want any reminders from today. And the final link is just to our next webinars. So we've got another one on buildings coming up, actually, which is on planning for capital projects. So if you've come today with a building hat on, you might be interested in signing up for that as well. And the recording from this session will be up on there in the next couple of days if you've got any colleagues you'd like to share this with. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.